Okay, so believe we are good to go. Well, welcome everyone, and it's really a big pleasure to be here with all of you today. Wish everyone is well and safe. My name is Bernardo Guarmon, and on behalf of the Portugal US Chamber of Commerce and our partner PALCUS, warm welcome to all of you attending the event today. I'm really honored to be hosting this webinar about relocating to Portugal for work or retirement, and discuss not only the soft aspects of relocation to this beautiful country, as well as to address all details around the tax framework, incentives for establishing a business when moving to Portugal. So we believe the timing could not be better on the aftermath of this pandemic situation, and I think the attendance we have here today only provides evidence of that. So welcome all once again. Before I do introduce the speakers today, just a few housekeeping details. So first, please use and abuse the Q&A function. So feel free, this section is for all of you and to address questions or comments you may have. You can use as well the chat function for any comments or commentaries, and please be quick. So we have broadcasting in Facebook, and the Q&A will be competing with questions posted online real time in Facebook. So feel free to be the first to ask the questions to our distinguished speakers today. The event is being broadcasted in PALCUS Facebook. A recording will be available as well for later viewing for anyone interested or to share with others that you may think may have interest in this subject. So let's, without further ado, I will introduce the speakers, and again, don't waste time. Start asking questions, and the questions will be introduced as we go along. It's my pleasure to introduce now the speakers. It's really a challenge for me to be able to summarize in few words the experience that we have collected around the screen. I'll start with former US Ambassador to Portugal, Mr. Robert Sherman, who will be opening the session and will be leading the conversation. So Mr. Ambassador is to the left bottom corner, and thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts about Portugal.
Pleasure. Prazer.
Muito bem, muito obrigado. Robert Sherman is a founding member and former co-managing shareholder of GT Law Boston office. In a nutshell, focuses practice on government and regulatory investigations and litigation, and as well as internal corporate investigations. 30 years of legal and public service experience. Mr. Sherman has a unique perspective, quite frankly, in terms of understanding the global landscape and ability to provide strategic counsel to clients on international issues, namely in European countries. During the period of 1991 to 1993, Mr. Sherman served as Assistant Attorney General and Chief of the Consumer Protection Division. Later, during 2014-2017, proudly served as US Ambassador to Portugal, being nominated by President Barack Obama and emphasized unanimously confirmed by United States Senate. So unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. As ambassador, focused heavily on the agenda of bilateral economic development, international security issues, cybersecurity, so already back then, refugees, narco-terrorism, and NATO. In recognition for his work for the country, our president, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, condecorated Mr. Sherman with the Grand Cross Order of Prince Henry the Navigator, which for any Portuguese is considered as an ultimate lifetime achievement in public service. So thank you for serving as well, Mr. Ambassador. Later, Mr. Sherman was appointed as an independent board member of a major international bank that has a majority shareholder, an American private equity firm. Holds a JD from the Boston University School of Law, a Bachelor's of Political Science from the University of Rochester, and has an array of admissions too lengthy to list. Thank you again for being here today and joining us in this conversation.
Thank you, Bernardo. It is a pleasure for me to be here today and to do this webinar with an organization that I've happily participated with in the past, the Portugal U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as jointly with PALCUS. I love keeping my ties with Portugal, and the opportunity to participate as I'm doing today is just one of those ties. As we were saying before, I was excited when the EU announced that fully vaccinated Americans will be able to travel to EU countries. I am a fully vaccinated American, which means I'll be able to return to Portugal in person. I hope in the coming months. It is really a country I have an incredible connection with. And so it's a pleasure for me to be able to talk on this subject, mainly because I lived in Portugal for 3 years as the U.S. ambassador. I have a sense of what that is like, even though I was in a very unique situation at that point. But I also did a lot of work with Portuguese companies, and I know where there are opportunities for businesses. But let me start this way, that about 10 days ago, a major international travel magazine, Travel and Leisure, had an article that said the 10 best countries for Americans who want to live abroad. The 10 best countries for Americans wanting to live abroad. And that made me think for a second, and I did a little background research, and I realized that there currently, in a country of 330 million Americans, there are 9 million American expats right now, Americans living in other countries other than the United States. And according to the State Department, my former employer, that number is expected to increase. And the reason that it's expected to increase really has to do with the fact that there are now opportunities that people are working remotely, they're learning remotely, they're attending university, for instance, remotely. So being physically present is not necessary as it once was in the future environment. So people are looking for the possibility of moving to places that are really more suitable for raising families, for lifestyle issues in that. And not surprising to me, according to Travel and Leisure magazine, the #1 country for Americans living abroad is Portugal. Now, there are several reasons. We have the issue of safety in Portugal. We have political and economic stability. We have quality of life. We have access to culture in Portugal. We have access to the outdoors, the weather as well. And I don't even want to go into the great wine and food that exists in Portugal. So one may think that really that is a major opportunity for retirees to come to Portugal, and it is. But interestingly, that's not where the major growth of Americans coming to Portugal is coming from. It's young entrepreneurs. And the fact is that Portugal is an exciting place for entrepreneurs who want to start businesses. And that goes from Lisbon to Porto to Braga, so south to north, east to west. as well. The fact is that the university system in Portugal is top notch. We are fortunate today to have a professor, my friend and colleague Michael Baum, who teaches in that university system and in one of the leading universities, Católica. So I'm sure he will endorse it. But you don't need to take my word for this. I understood what was happening in Portugal in the world of entrepreneurship and innovation from even before I got to Portugal. In preparing to come, I knew that MIT, the leading technology university, or one of the leading technology universities in the United States, has a Portugal program, MIT's Portugal program, run by a PhD astrophysicist by the name of Deva Newman. Deva went on, while I was serving as ambassador, she was the deputy administrator of NASA, combining her work that she did at MIT, which is to put the next person on Mars. I went over to visit Deva for an hour meeting. 3 hours later, I left her office at MIT. And the reason the meeting went on so long is she told me that Portugal was MIT's favorite program, and that, in fact, the quality of innovation and entrepreneurship and technology coming out of the major Portuguese universities was equivalent to that of the major US universities, which is an incredible statement for those of you that have any understanding of MIT professors. So it shows just how highly she thought of it. Later, I had the opportunity to put together a tech mission, a mission that looked at technology throughout Portugal and what was happening. We did one on biotech, which was led by Craig Mello, Nobel Prize winner, man of Portuguese descent, 2006 winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine in the life science area for his work on RNA interference. And for those of you that follow this, which is what led to the CRISPR and now has led to the discovery of the vaccine for COVID and the like. And again, we went throughout Portugal looking at what was happening in the life science industry, at the universities, in business, at foundations like Champalimaud and Gulbenkian and the like. And Craig stayed with me in Portugal. And before he left, I asked him, because I didn't have the training to assess it, what did he think in terms of innovation in Portugal in the life science arena? Was it good? Was it average? Or was it below average? And his answer was it was cutting edge for anywhere in the world. So that's the system that exists in Portugal. I can tell you on the one hand that what made Portugal so special for me, coming in for a little over a 3-year stint as U.S. ambassador, was not the food and it was not the wine. It was the Portuguese people. When I was doing my consultations in the State Department, before I came as ambassador, I was walking through the halls and people would stop me and say, "I understand you're going to Lisbon." And I would say, "Yes." And they would say, "How did you get so lucky?" And I thought at first what they were talking about was what I had mentioned before: the food, the wine, the weather. They were talking about the Portuguese people. They said, "You will never find a more welcoming and lovely people anywhere in the world than you will in Portugal." These are career diplomats that have served all over the world. And what happened was that made my experience and the experience of my wife so special was being embraced by such a warm and lovely people. So you have a constellation of incredible factors. And I know we'll get into a little bit later when Bashir gets to present some of the details. And I know there have been some questions asked on golden visas and the like, and we'll get into the details. But I wanted to talk about, again, the two perspectives generally. One is those of you that want to live because you're in a position of retirement. But on the other hand, those of you that have business interests that may be looking for those connections. I mentioned the entrepreneurship and startup culture that exists in Portugal. The Web Summit, which is the major international convention of techies, moved in 2016 from Dublin to Portugal. 50,000 techies came, the CEOs of all the countries. The reason why it moved to Lisbon was, again, this culture. In 2019, that number had gone up to about 70,000 people, and then last year, although remotely, 104,000 people attended. Prime Minister Antonio Costa, during this period of time when Portugal holds the rotating presidency of the European Council, has formed the Europe Startup Alliance of Nations, in which, again, there are 24 members of the EU that have signed on to what in June will be called the Lisbon Declaration, talking about how the countries can work in the digital era on ethics, on competitiveness, on cooperation, and keeping talent. But the final thing I want to say on the business front is this: what makes Portugal such an attractive place is really a few different things. One is you don't see the same kind of private sector strikes you see in other parts of Europe. The Portuguese are hard workers. They don't change jobs. Many times workers stay with companies 20, 30, 40 years, and the same. They're loyal. The cost of hiring, for instance, a Portuguese engineer is about 60% of hiring an engineer in the United States. Yet the quality of the service that people are getting are as good, if not better. And you find the Portuguese, you give them an assignment, they'll anticipate what the next two issues are going to be and solve that problem as well. So it is an incredible ecosystem, both on just people who are looking for a great place to live. We'll get into a little bit the tax structure as well, and the incentives on that a little bit later on, but also for people that are looking to expand their businesses. And the final factor that I'll get into is people in Portugal speak English. You have no language barriers, so it is a great place that you don't have to worry about the fact that you can't communicate with the people that are your neighbors, your friends, your business colleagues, and the like, and frequently speak other languages in Europe as well. So whether it's German or French or Spanish, as an example, it really is the focal point of the place to be. And then finally, and at last, it's the Portuguese attitude. The Portuguese consider themselves more Atlanticists than they do European. Somebody once joked with me, the Portuguese stand on the banks of the Atlantic with their backs towards Europe, looking at the United States. We're considered neighbors, separated by just a little body of water called the Atlantic Ocean, but culturally and philosophically, the mindset in Portugal is open, it's tolerant. Portugal passed, for instance, the equal rights, the gay marriage, its gay marriage law 5 years before the United States did, showing the tolerance of the country. So with that, let me end right there. I'm happy later on, or as Bernardo wants, to take any questions, but let's get to the rest of the panelists. I will say that when I left Portugal in my last address, I said that that Portugal will always be in our souls and the Portuguese people in our hearts. And 4 years later, that statement rings as true today as it did when I said it. It is a very special country, and a country that does remain in my soul and the people in my hearts. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. We'll park the questions, but thank you so much. So thank you for your insightful words, and it's very hard to listen to you and keep emotions straight, frankly. So very powerful, and sharing your experience firsthand about Portugal, and I mean, it's worth a billion words from any set of Portuguese. It's worth more so than a billion words from any Portuguese. So thank you for sharing your experience firsthand and having such a high bar as an American and speaking like this of our country and your experience. So truly appreciate. And I know we have several questions. We'll just park for a moment, and we'll get back to you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bernardo.
Okay, so keeping on the left of the screen, but going up, we have on the left top corner, Michael Baum. Muito obrigado, Michael, for being here today as well. Michael is a professor of political science at the Universidade Católica Portuguesa. It happens to be my school, but I think Michael will endorse it, in Lisbon, and has published widely various aspects of Portuguese politics. Michael is originally from central Pennsylvania, and is naturalized dual citizen since 1993. So no way back for you, Michael. You are locked to Portugal. He had the chance to live working in Portugal for more than 30 years, so quite some time. And since 2014 has been living permanently in Lisbon with his wife and 2 school-age kids, after receiving the invitation from the US Embassy in Portugal and the Portuguese government to serve on the executive board of Luso-American Development Foundation, FLAD, so an organization quite important for the relationships between Portugal and the US. And I'm not the one to comment on Mr. Ambassador's words, but it's absolutely right. It's a great example of being a neighbor country. So FLAD is a great example of that. Just a large pond in the middle. Michael has been focused on building new programs that link the 2 countries' systems on higher education, and continues to do the same for Católica now. So prior to moving to Portugal, he was a professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and he has a 2-time Fulbright grantee to Portugal. Received or has experienced renovating 2 homes in Lisbon. I don't know if this is a teaser for questions. I bet it is. And has also opened a small business in the tourism sector. So quite a wide range of experience. Muito obrigado, Michael, as well, for being here today and sharing your experience firsthand.
Well, it's my pleasure, Bernard. Thanks, and it's an honor to be invited. It's an honor to be here again with Ambassador Sherman, who I had the pleasure of serving, you could say, as an executive board member at FLAD. He was the U.S. ambassador at the time, and there's obviously a close relationship between FLAD and both the Portuguese government and the U.S. government. And he was our rock star and will always remain our rock star. So I feel like I'm in good company. Basically, I guess the best way to start is maybe just briefly tell a little bit about my story. I feel like maybe I sort of should start this with like one of those prospectuses for investors that your results may vary from mine. But I had absolutely no connection to Portugal. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, no family or ethnic connection to Portugal. I didn't speak the language. And it was really just kind of serendipity. A buddy of mine at the University of Toronto had, where I was doing my master's work, he had been to Portugal this summer before, and he knew I was looking to do something international, and I didn't know exactly what it would be. I'd missed the deadline for Peace Corps, and anyways, long story short, he knew some Americans that were teaching English here in Lisbon, and he just kind of kept hounding me to make a phone call, my first intercontinental phone call, to the school here in Portugal. And so I first came to Portugal in 1988, thinking I would just be here for a year teaching English. And then I figured I would eventually do my PhD, but I didn't want to do it right away. And, as life happens, and I'm certainly not a unique story, I met a lovely Portuguese woman while I was here as a young 23-year-old, and it changed my life. So we sort of convinced me to stay for a second year until 1990. Then I came back to the States, and my wife stayed here. She was in school here. And somehow we kept it going for long distance. Eventually, I came back in 93 on a Fulbright grant. And that was the year we got married. And I was able to get dual citizenship, naturalization. And ever since then, basically, it's been a back and forth kind of life. Once I say I've been living off and on, working off and on in Portugal for more than 30 years now. And, it's amazing to see, it was really a different country back in those days compared to what it's like today. I mean, truly, it's another world. And as you said, since 14, I've had the honor, the pleasure, and the luck, really, of being able to come back here and live and work here full time. Again, not something I really planned on. The invitation from the embassy was unexpected, and I had tenure and a career at UMass, and figured I would only really be able to come back here for retirement. But had a wonderful opportunity to serve at FLAD and now at Católica, continuing to sort of build these bridges between the two countries. So I don't want to repeat the same thing that Ambassador Sherman said about all the truly amazing reasons to come to Portugal. There's so many, it's hard to exhaust them. I guess what I could try to do is maybe be a little bit of the bad cop to Ambassador Sherman's good cop, in the sense of, talking about some of the challenges of being in Portugal as an American that I think any American will face. I don't think it's news to say that bureaucracy sometimes is a challenge in Portugal, without a doubt. It is in the States too. Anytime you have to go to the DMV, I think you know what that's like. So it can be a challenge. I will say, however, that for example, I have modest experience in starting up a small business, and it was incredibly easy. Really, within a day, you can have your small business identification number. And this obviously was made much easier by the fact that I was already here in Portugal, and I'm a dual citizen, and I have a bank account and a finance number and all of that. But really, I think Bashir is going to speak in much more detail about all of the sort of legal and tax incentives that exist. So I won't go into those. I will say that, yes, I've had, there's not enough time in the world, I think, to hear my saga of renovating 2 homes in Portugal. And again, you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but there are certainly challenges, you know, with working with builders, with getting the kind of follow through that, and I think, again, Portugal's not all that different from the United States in this regard. I mean, plenty of my fellow Americans have had nightmare stories about working with builders in the States. And so it's not that different. But yes, it's a challenge, especially if things go awry with your builder, as happened in my particular case. One of the big challenges in Portugal, and again, I think this is, anybody who's done a little bit of research on Portugal would find this easily. So again, I'm not trying to only talk negatively in any way about Portugal, but the judicial system here is a challenge. There's no doubt that it's not particularly efficient. The idea that the judicial system will be able to, you know, right wrongs in a quick and efficient way is something that you should probably disabuse yourself of pretty quickly before you get into business in Portugal, and know that it's an incredibly safe country. It's an incredibly human country in terms of your interaction with the police. I think in ways that Americans just cannot imagine. You know, you regularly see Portuguese engaging in fierce debate with police officers in the street, you know, in a way that in the States, you know, you don't do, right? You know, you get stopped by the cops for a speeding ticket, and it's yes sir, no sir, and you're very tight-lipped. Here, the relationship with the police, maybe as a result of the revolutionary period, is I would say much more equal. That said, you know, the relationship with the judicial system, the general orientation is you don't want to get involved with the judicial system if you can avoid it, right? It's notorious in terms of the slowness of making decisions. And on the other hand, you know, positively speaking, the cost, and I think Bashir has some great slides that I don't want to steal his thunder, but despite the fact that housing prices in Lisbon and Porto have appreciated tremendously in the last few years, they're still, relative to other, you know, European capitals, a tremendous bargain. And I think Bashir has some slides that will sort of put a point on that. I should also mention, you know, that my wife continues to work remotely. You know, she's Portuguese national, well, with dual nationality as well, but she still works for her company based in Rhode Island, but from Lisbon. And so, you know, if anybody wants to ask questions, or I haven't had a chance to keep up with all of the ones that have been coming in while I've been speaking, but you know, her situation, I'd be happy to sort of also shed some light on how, you know, how her company dealt with that and how she has dealt with it, and or if there are any questions about, you know, dual taxation that Bashir can't answer, I can certainly talk about my own personal experience of filing taxes in both countries, and you know, and how that has gone. It's been relatively straightforward and easy because of the tax treaty that exists between the US and Portugal. In terms of education, you know, I do have 2 school-age kids who have really kind of run the gamut from, you know, private international schools to now both of them are in public, you know, Lisbon high schools. So I'm happy to also answer any questions that people might have about, you know, what it's like bringing your kids over. We brought them over in 14 at 2nd grade and kindergarten, which was a great age. And even though we tried to speak Portuguese with them in the States, you know how it is in the States, everybody kind of wants to blend in. I think that's true really anywhere you go. And so for us, you know, they're now completely bilingual and bicultural, and it happened very quickly. And as Ambassador Sherman said, in some ways, you know, when you want to practice your Portuguese, if you look like a foreigner, you're gonna have a hard time sometimes because the Portuguese are so incredibly easygoing regarding English, and many times want to practice their English with you, that sometimes you have to really insist and say, no, you know, I really do speak Portuguese, and I want to keep speaking Portuguese with you. But it's, you know, this is very different from, say, your experience if you go to Spain or France or Italy. So it's a really quite unique thing about Portugal. There's really not, you know, I can't say enough positive things. I guess, you know, what I would just hasten to point out, or that I'd be happy to answer more detailed questions.
Michael, there was a comment on chat regarding, is there a big difference in this, in speaking English and your, between the urban and the more rural? Do you find that in rural areas, it's harder to communicate, or do you think that nowadays it's more evened out?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, in the more rural areas of Portugal, the density of English speakers goes down, no doubt about that. I lived in a small rural village in the Alentejo from 1993 to 94. And yeah, in those days, virtually nobody spoke English, and that was great for my Portuguese. Nowadays, virtually, I would say anybody who has gone through at least high school level of education and beyond speaks, very good English. And so the rural areas have, very large numbers of people who you can absolutely communicate with. But will you have a higher probability of running into, especially older folks who don't speak enough English to communicate? Yeah, for sure. I mean, even in Lisbon, sometimes you'll run into a taxi driver or somebody who doesn't speak really enough English to kind of have a meaningful conversation. But I would say that's now a rarity in the urban areas. In general, it's incredible how fluent people are in the language. But yeah, I would say yes, in the rural areas, for sure, it's more of a challenge.
Thank you. We have a number of questions in the chat and in the Q&A, some of which I feel would be partly covered by Bashir, and then your comments, as well as Mr. Ambassador's comments. So maybe instead of doing this back to front, we should go through the presentation and then go through the Q&A.
Okay. Oh, fantastic, Michael. Many thanks for sharing your experience and your thoughts as well. And let's keep insisting on the important things that need to be improved. So it's our job here as well to insist on those. So thank you so much for pointing them out as well. So we'll get back to you soon, as Magda said. So and third but not last, so moving to the right top of the screen, so we have Bashir, Karim, Vakil. Thank you, Bashir, for being here today as well. Bashir is a lawyer, graduated from University of Lisbon, Portugal, postgraduated in oil and gas and regulatory framework in Brazil, admitted to both Portuguese and Brazilian bar associations, so clearly fluent in the two most well-spoken variances of Portuguese. 15 years experience in advising foreign clients to do business in both countries, as well as nationals to do business abroad. Bashir has started his career in oil and gas and infrastructure sectors, and now manages a team of professionals that help clients in real estate, corporate acquisitions, cryptocurrency. I see here another teaser for questions, blockchain investments, focus on taxation, tax planning, corporate works, and immigration. So thank you very much, Bashir, for being here today, and appreciate sharing your thoughts and some documents some materials that you have prepared.
Well, thank you very much, Bernardo, for the kind introduction, and trying to fill in the shoes that Mr. Ambassador and Michael left to fill. It's actually I would have to say that a lot has been said and well said by both Michael and Mr. Ambassador, even on the subjects that I'm addressing. But well, since I need to do a presentation and these are usually boring, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, because my conversation will not be as enticing as theirs. So let's jump into this. Let me just share my screen. Okay, I'm guessing everyone is saying it now, right?
Wonderful, perfect.
Okay, so basically, I'm going to do I'm going to speak a little bit about the about tax incentives and special regimes for foreigners or Portuguese people that want to come back to Portugal, as well as visas, and a little bit about the real estate market in Portugal. So afterwards, if there's any questions, feel free to get back to me, and I'll make this presentation available. I guess you can download it through either the chamber or PALCUS. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but it's going to be made available. So basically, the presentation is for anyone who wishes to relocate to Portugal, or it could be interesting for someone who would like to diversify their investment portfolio. As Michael said, it's been appreciated. So real estate, which is the main source of investment for foreigners in Portugal, it has appreciated a lot in the last few years, but I would say that there's still quite a lot of room for appreciation, since we're still among the cheapest in Europe. Why Portugal? As Michael and Mr. Ambassador said, of course, the lifestyle. That's one of the things, as Bernardo mentioned, I lived abroad. I lived in Brazil for 12 years. And one of the things, and although the lifestyle in Brazil is amazing, one of the things I missed was the Portuguese lifestyle, which is quite, I would say, if I may so, I would say that Portugal is maybe the Brazil of Europe. It's within the European countries within European countries is probably the most Brazilian. Of course, opportunities in the real estate market for anyone who wishes to invest. Quite low interest rates, although in several different business opportunities you get, I would say that you get lower yields in Portugal. The return on investments in the States are quite high, but you do have to consider that Portugal has very low interest rates. The whole of Europe now has very low interest rates, so that's quite interesting. And of course, the tax benefits that we're going to address moving forward. As said before, the price per square meter in Lisbon is still, well, Lisbon, Porto, Braga, it's still below European average. And I have a few charts that I understand now that they're maybe a little bit too small for people to see them online. But then again, you'll be able to see them once you get the presentation. But just as an example, the average price for a 2-bedroom apartment in Portugal, not Lisbon or Porto or a specific city, but the average for a 2-bedroom apartment in Portugal would be around 156,000 euro. Whereas, I mean, you have Italy, it would be 225, the United Kingdom 268, and then of course you have Switzerland 642, and so on. The average price per square meter for a 2-bedroom apartment in city center. City center meaning major cities, not necessarily downtown Lisbon or historical Lisbon or whatever, but it would be around 2,641 in Portugal, per opposed to 10,000 in Switzerland, 5,800 in Sweden, and so on. The average price for a 2-bedroom apartment in the largest cities, so Lisbon, it would be around 320,000 euro, whereas Shenzhen, China, it's 693, Geneva, Switzerland, 722. I mean, you have London, 932,000. And then going back to the return on investment. This is pretty much based on pre-COVID short-term rental figures, but short-term rental, we're talking Portugal between, for city center, around 5%. Outside city center just below 6%, which is very similar to New York, and it's compared to other cities in Europe, it's considerably higher, as you can see. Moving forward, low interest rates, as mentioned, Euribor, which is the European interbanking loan rate, is at its all-time low. And you get, even for foreigners, you get bank loans starting at 1.35% per year, which is quite low. And even for foreigners, the banks are accepting a debt equity ratio, conservatively speaking, at 70-30. So if you have funds to pay a 30% deposit, you could potentially get 70% debt in a Portuguese bank starting at 1.35% per year interest rate, which is quite interesting. Then, of course, we have tax benefits. Tax benefits, I'm going to address two major tax benefits that mostly everyone has heard about. One is the NHR, the non-habitual residency regime. The name is not very self-explanatory, as people tend to say, okay, so if I become a tax resident, will I still qualify for this? The answer is, if you qualify for the conditions, then yes, because non-habitual resident actually stands for people that have not resided in Portugal for the past 5 years, or that have never resided in Portugal from a tax residency perspective. So if you have not resided in Portugal as a tax resident, or if you have not resided in Portugal for the past 5 years, then you qualify for potentially being a non-habitual resident, which is basically a tax benefit that lasts for 10 years, grants you tax exemption on almost all foreign sources of income. So sources of income that you get from abroad, except for pensions, which are now taxed at 10% since 2020, under penalty of Portugal being considered a tax haven by the other countries in Europe. It's almost all foreign sources of income are not taxed in Portugal, provided that are taxed abroad, or that there's a double taxation treaty between the two countries, and a 20% flat rate on certain Portuguese sourced incomes from professions or self-employment, which are considered added value professions. There's a list of professions that are considered that are subject to this beneficial regime. So as a term of comparison, just so you understand, the Portuguese individual taxation regime is a progressive regime that goes all the way up to 48% on the highest tier. The highest tier the threshold is quite low when compared to the States. So the threshold is 86, if I'm not mistaken, thousand euros per year. If you make more than 86,000 euros per year, then you're taxed at 48%. Not under this non-habitual taxation regime if you get your profession to be qualified in one of those listed professions. And then this is not, I'm sorry, this is wrong on this slide, because this is not specific of the NHR program, but Portugal, there is no taxation on gifts or inheritance to family members, direct family members. Gifts given to third parties or non-direct family members are taxed at 10% stamp duty, and there is no wealth tax except for this very minor taxation, which is now in force for anyone that holds real estate assets in excess of 600,000 euro individually, or 1.2 million euro per couple. But this is based on the taxable value of the property. Just for the sake of argument, if you buy a house for 500,000 euro, more often than not, it will be listed in the tax services as being worth 100,000 euro, for instance. For the purposes of this wealth tax, it's the taxation value of the property, not the acquisition value of the property. So it's a quite high threshold according to Portuguese standards, and it's a very minor additional tax that you have to pay on these property holdings. Another very interesting program is the Regressar program. Regressar is a literal translation would be return, and Portugal pretty much offers a special program for Portuguese immigrants that wish to move back to Portugal, and which is extendable to their direct relatives or relatives up to the third degree, provided that these relatives have resided with them permanently for at least 12 months abroad, of course. This regime is applicable to people that have lived in Portugal prior to the 31st of December 2015, and that have not resided in Portugal for the previous 3 years. This regime provides for the taxation of only 50% of the beneficiaries' revenues stemming from dependent or independent work or entrepreneurial activity. So pretty much everything that you do actively. And they are valid for a period of 5 years. So for the sake of argument, if you make 100,000, you're only taxed on top of 50,000, which is then taxed at the progressive regime in Portugal. Additionally, this regime is very interesting because it provides lines of credit to incentivize the establishment of new businesses in Portugal. So lines of credit have been created up to 1 million per company or 500K per individual that wants to come back to Portugal and start their line of business. Moving forward to visas, you have temporary visas and you have residency visas. We're going to address the residency visas, and among the residency visas, which I think are the most important for everyone on this presentation, are the D2 visa, the startup visa, the D7 visa, and the golden visa, which some will say is not really a visa per se, legally speaking, but it's a residency permit, which I just put within the residency visa so that for ease of reference. So the D2 visa is an independent work, is for independent work or entrepreneurs, and pretty much is for anyone who is authorized to carry out an independent profession in Portugal. Just to understand, independent professions are regulated professions in Portugal, such as lawyers or engineers that render services, independent services to third parties. If you qualify and you are accredited within the regulatory bodies that regulate certain professions in Portugal, you're allowed to qualify for this visa or to apply for this visa. Or if you have made investments in Portugal pursuant to a business plan that has to have been approved by the competent authorities, so either the VFS authority or the embassy or the consulate, or if you can show financial ability in Portugal and the intention to make an investment pursuant to a business plan that has to be approved by the competent authorities. For any of these visas, you need to show that you have available means of substance that can last for 7 months, if you want to qualify for the visa in item A, or 12 months for all the remaining items. As to what it means to have available means of substance, I will show you, I think, 2 or 3 slides after this one, what this exactly means. The startup visa is also a pretty interesting visa, which is for investors that are developing a project which is integrated into a certified incubator. So there are certified incubators in Portugal. If you're interested in the startup visa, you can approach one of these incubators. If I'm not mistaken, you can go to the website of YAPME. I can then leave the link somewhere. And you have accredited incubators there, which you can pretty much set up conference calls or meetings with them. They can tell you whether they're interested in your project, and provided that you can show liquidity of $6,200 US, and that you can transfer these amounts to Portugal, you can qualify, and that your project is approved by the incubator, you can qualify for this startup visa. The D7 is probably the most well-known visa in the United States, I would say, alongside the golden visa, which is the so-called retirement visa or passive income visa. And people that can qualify for this visa are either retirees who wish to move to Portugal or people living out of individual revenue who wish to move to Portugal, provided that they can prove to have available means of substance that can last for 12 months and that these amounts can be made available in Portugal. So what does it mean to have the sufficient means of subsistence? It means to have, according to Portuguese legislation, the equivalent to 1 minimum salary. 1 minimum salary in Portugal is today equivalent to about USD 800 per month. And if it's more than one person, so for the first adult, you would have to have 800 euro. For the second or more adults, 50% of that amount per adult. For children under the age of 18 and older if dependents, 30%, which means, for the sake of argument, that if you have a couple with one child who wants to prove that they have the means of subsistence to move to Portugal, they would have to have the equivalent to 1,440 US per month, or 17,280 US per year. You can either show proof of having this amount deposited into an account, or if you're qualifying for the retirement visa, you can show proof that you can wire this amount in full to Portugal, and that you can wire this amount net to Portugal, and it should be enough. So this is probably the most well-known around the world right now of all Portuguese visas, the Golden Visa, which is applicable or is eligible for the Golden Visa anyone who's a non-European Union citizen or that comes out of a country who's a signatory of the Schengen Agreement and who does not have a Portuguese citizenship and who is willing to carry out an investment activity in Portugal for a minimum period of 5 years. An investment activity in Portugal for the purposes of this visa is an investment pursuant to a list that encompasses all the investments that qualify for the Golden Visa, which are basically 500,000 euros in the acquisition of real estate properties in Portugal, no strings attached, 350,000 euros in the acquisition of real estate property, of which the construction was concluded at least 30 years prior to the acquisition, or which is located within the areas defined in Portugal as urban rehabilitation areas. And 350,000 euros includes not only the acquisition, but also the execution of the required rehabilitation works. The third sort of investment would be 350,000 euros in an investment fund or a venture capital fund that has an exposure of at least 60% to the capitalization of Portuguese companies, and that at the time of the investment has a minimum maturity period of 5 years. The fourth item would be 350,000 euro in the scientific research activities developed by entities which are enrolled with the national scientific and technological system. Then you have 350,000 euros in the equity of an existing company or in the incorporation of a new company with the creation and maintenance of at least 5 permanent jobs for a period of 3 years. You would also have the transfer of capital, 1 million euros to a Portuguese account that can then be invested or not. It can just sit there. And you need to show proof of keeping that money deposited in a Portuguese bank account. That would also qualify for the Golden Visa. Another investment would be 250,000 euro in an existing or a new artistic production, or the restoration or maintenance of assets that are registered as national cultural heritage assets. Finally, you could qualify for the Golden Visa by creating 10 permanent jobs for a minimum period of 5 years. The advantages of the Golden Visa, as I would say that a lot of people already know, is that one is awarded a special and temporary permission to reside and work in Portugal, with the possibility of, after 5 years, if certain requirements are met, applying for a permanent visa or the acquisition of Portuguese citizenship. This visa allows for the possibility of circulating within the Schengen space without the need of a regular visa, and the possibility of extending the visa and the above benefits to direct family members. Differently from the other visas, which require that you stay in Portugal for at least 183 days per year, this visa only requires that you stay in Portugal for a minimum of 7 days for the first year, followed by a minimum of 14 days per every 2-year renovation, which is an average of 7 days per year. The Golden Visa, the thresholds have changed for the year 2022. Pretty much the differences for the coming year will be that the threshold on the capital investment raises from 1 million to 1.5 million, pure capital investment or transfer. The transfer of capital for scientific research activities increases from 350 to 500. The transfer of capital to investment funds or venture capital funds increases from 350 to 500. The transfer of capital for investment in the equity of an existing company increases from 350 to 500. And the major difference is in real estate investments in residential properties, which becomes limited to investments in the Azores or Madeira, two islands offshore Portugal, or interior territories in mainland Portugal as defined in a specific decree. This limitation does not apply to commercial or non-residential properties. So that's definitely a plus. One thing I think it's interesting is relevant taxes on that apply to investments in Portugal or property holdings. You have the property transfer tax, IMT, which is levied on all transfers of real estate located in Portuguese territory, 5% for rural properties, a progressive rate up to 7.5% for urban residencies. It's considerably lower if the property is worth less than, or is acquired for less than €1 million, and 6.5 for non-residential properties. The stamp duty, which is also levied on the acquisition, is 0.8% of the acquisition value, and if you're getting a loan from a bank, the stamp duty is 0.6% of the total loan amount. Then on the holding of the property, you have a general municipal property tax, which is ranges from 0.3% to 0.45% on urban properties. This is an annual fee, 0.8 on rural properties. And if you are a homeowner that sits on a tax haven, a blacklisted jurisdiction, you're taxed at 7.5%. If you're trying to qualify for the golden visa and you are an individual that is sitting in a blacklisted jurisdiction, one of the options you have is to do the investment through a special purpose entity, which is a sole proprietorship company that you can open in Portugal, and you can do the investment via that company. By acquiring property via that special purpose unit in Portugal, you will not be subject to this 7.5% taxation. Then you have real estate earnings, which are earnings from rental income in Portugal, are taxed at 28%. There's a different regime for short-term rental, which is taxed at a taxable basis of 35%, which is then taxed at either the progressive regime or a fixed rate if you're a non-resident. And then you have the real estate capital gains, which, if they are the proceeds of the sale of your main residency, they're tax exempt, provided that you reinvest the proceeds within 2 years in a new primary residency. It doesn't have to be in Portugal. It could be somewhere around the world, depending on the existence of a special treaty or not, or within Europe. For tax residents, if it's not your main residency, capital gains or real estate capital gains are taxed at 50% of the assessed capital gain, and then according to the progressive taxation regime. So if you buy for 100,000, you spend 50,000, and you sell for 250,000, you make 100,000, you would tax 50% of that amount, so you tax 50,000 according to the progressive regime. If you are a non-resident, capital gains are taxed at 28% in full. So same assessment. If you buy something for 100,000, you renovate the place and you spend 50,000, and you sell for 250, you'd be taxed at 28% over the 100. If you do not reside within the European Union, if you do, you're allowed to choose the taxation regime of the 50%, but then you'd have to assess your full gains in Portugal. That's pretty much it. I will try to answer any questions that you have in connection with this. If not, I'm leaving my email here and my cell phone number. You can send emails, and I'll try to address the questions. And I guess that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bashir. We have a number of questions for all the panel members. one of the questions we have from Rogério Fernandes Ferreira, directed to Michael. So it's regarding the Portuguese ability to communicate internationally. Before moving to Portugal, were you aware of the Portuguese tax and legal allures? Which were the major factors that made you decide to relocate to Portugal and to work for Portuguese University? Has our fiscal system, namely the benefits that Portugal grants, have anything to do with it? And were these appealing, or were you not aware of its existence before you moved? So how did this go for you?
Sure. Yeah, a quick answer was that no, in our case, we didn't know about the NHR status at all before this last and most recent permanent move in 2014. We had been coming back and forth. I spent a year here, for example, in 2012-13, doing a project for UMass. And during that year, which was a good year to buy property in Portugal because the crisis was full blown at that point, we managed to buy a small apartment here that at the time we thought, we would rent out during the academic year, and then we'd always have a place to come back in the summers because every summer we would come back. And at least in those days, it was easy to find short-term rentals for like a couple of weeks. But it was somewhat more difficult to find a nice furnished place in downtown Lisbon for, say like 3 months. I think that's changed now with Airbnb and, all the new platforms that have come online. But this is a long-winded answer to say no. When we came in 2014, it really was based on this opportunity to come and work for FLAD, which was an organization that I knew well. I'd been a grantee several times by FLAD. And I was just really jazzed with the idea of being able to, to work at an organization whose mission I believe deeply in, and who I knew and know does really good work. I will say that, once we did get here, we did find out about an NHR, and yes, we both have NHR status, and it works great. I mean, basically, ours will expire in 24. Both of us have the 20% flat tax rate. Our occupation's qualified. And so it wasn't a factor in our move. But obviously for a lot of Americans who are considering coming over, it's a great program. I think one of the things that I didn't mention before that I think is an important thing to consider is that, it's a two-sided coin. So for an employer and someone who wants to start up a business, labor costs here are, remarkably much cheaper, as Ambassador Sherman said. And so that's great if you're an employer. Of course, the downside is if you're coming over to work, I think for almost any occupation in the United States, you will sometimes, you have to hold up your chin when you discover what, say the going salaries are in your sector. Portuguese salaries are significantly lower than in the United States. And even average salaries in the EU. So it's a two-way street, in terms of whether you come over as an employer or you come over as a wage earner. But from my perspective, the lifestyle issues, the quality of life, the notion that here in Portugal, people kind of, work to live, whereas in the States, one sometimes has this feeling that you're living to work. It's really, for us, it more than makes up for, for any lower salary that I have, living here in Portugal. But yeah, it was not a factor in our personal decision. No.
Thank you very much, Michael. We go now back to Bashir with a few questions on the taxation of pension income. So as I understand from the question is if you are a US citizen benefiting from receiving a pension, how would that be taxed in Portugal? And if there are any exemptions for specific pension income.
So unfortunately, thank you, Magda. Unfortunately, as of 2020, up to 2020, pensions were not taxed in Portugal. So this would depend on the double taxation treaty between the countries. Most double taxation treaties would state that the pension, the signatory country is allowed to tax the pension only on the country of residency, not the country or where the pension comes from. So right now, so this, and because the NHR regime provided for the opportunity for the pension not to be taxed, that was the case up to 2020. As I said during my presentation, there was a huge hassle created by the remaining countries in Europe, in the European Union, stating that they was going to blacklist Portugal. So pretty much Portugal agreed to start taxing pensions at 10%. So that's the case now. There is no, not that I know of, there is no special exemption for any sort of pensions. I do know, however, that there are certain types of pensions that are not taxed at the country of residency, such as, for instance, in such countries, pensions being paid directly by public offices or government bodies or state security entities and so on, military. So those have to be taxed at source. If they're taxed at source and not taxed in Portugal, there is always the credit system. So if you pay abroad, you would only pay in Portugal the 10% if 10% is higher than whatever you'd be paying abroad. If not, then you only pay abroad. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much. Then we have a question on healthcare, perhaps best suited for Michael and also for Mr. Ambassador while he was residing in Portugal. The question was regarding the quality of healthcare. It was particularly highlighted recently when there was, so my concern with retirement in Portugal is healthcare. I realize we can pay for private healthcare. However, I did hear that private hospitals could not handle the COVID pandemic and transferred patients to public hospitals. What are the panel's thoughts on healthcare for expats?
Michael, start.
You want me to start? Okay, sure. Well, I guess I would first of all say the quality of healthcare here in Portugal is remarkably high. It's in all of the international rankings of quality of healthcare, which you can Google and look up. Portugal performs quite well. It has a robust private healthcare system, as well as, frankly, a chronically underfunded public system. But the public system is where you go when you have a very serious illness. I think Bernardo or any other, or Bashir can back me up on this, that in general, if you come up with a very serious illness, most people go straight to the public system. The private healthcare system will have nicer accoutrements, maybe a nicer room, and certainly it's where we go when we have sort of routine healthcare issues. But when you have a serious illness, most people here still use the public system. It's in terms of comparisons to US costs, I mean, there's just no comparison. Private health insurance here is a fraction of the costs that you pay for family policies in the States. Even as a former public, state of Massachusetts employee, my yearly, payroll deductions and out-of-pocket copays are light years higher than what we pay presently. Mr. Ambassador, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to endorse what you have to say, but also I want to kind of look at it from the cost of procedures as well in Portugal, which are light years different from the cost of procedures in the U.S. I mean, I think I used to obviously I had healthcare through the State Department, so I wasn't I wasn't insured or paying through the Portuguese system, but I was a consumer of healthcare in Portugal, and to say that the quality of the care that I got, not just because I was an ambassador, but because of what the system was truly remarkable. I'll give you an example on something in the dental area. I needed two implants, two dental implants, and I believe if I'm thinking correctly, I think that I was quoted in the United States a price of $8,000 for the dental implants. I went to a dentist who specializes this in Portugal. First of all, it wasn't just an X-ray. He had a portable MRI machine in his office to really do it. He did the work. I think my total charges for the two implants were $1,500 or $1,800. By comparison, when I got back to the United States, my regular dentist looked at it and said, "This is absolutely remarkable work." So that gives you an idea of the difference. Since I go back and forth every month, I now think to myself, well, if I have a bad toothache, can I live with it until I get to Portugal and get it taken care of by my old dentist there? Likewise, CAT scans, X-rays, MRIs, a fraction of the cost in the United States. So I wouldn't let access to healthcare stop me from moving in Portugal, nor the quality of healthcare. Magda, you're muted.
You are correct. I'm very sorry. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. So we have a number of questions here. Let's see how we are going to do this. One is setting up and developing a profitable company is a challenge. 80% upwards of new companies do not survive. What incentives are there to support growing successful companies, and what resources are available? Where is a good starting point? Maybe we can connect that to another comment that we had here about wanting to set up an interior design business in Portugal, and what would be a good starting point. So I don't know if you're able to direct these participants to some resources, or if this is something that we can then later send further information or links. Who would like to address?
Bashir, do you want to try and tackle that one?
I can. I mean, actually, this is not very legal per se, but it's so Michael actually sent, I think, to the chat room. He sent a link to Startup Portugal, I think, which has very interesting information. Again, I'm making myself available if anyone wants to drop any questions, specific questions that you may have regarding coming to Portugal or understanding what the taxation is on companies. I mean, for starting a business in Portugal, I would say, as for starting a business anywhere in the world, I would say that you would need to understand what your exposure to liability is, either from an individual standpoint and or from a corporate standpoint. That's usually the information that you use as basis to decide whether you want to start a company or whether you want to do it individually. Then, of course, what are the running costs of running a company, and what are the running costs of doing it as an individual, including paying social security in Portugal and so on and so forth. And then pretty much I would say that Portugal, by sitting within the European Union, is now a terrific hub for getting allowances from the European Union, sponsorship from the European Union, depending on where your project or where your idea sits. So if it's technological, if it's fintech, if it's artistic, you have different lines of credit with different sorts of entities. The entity I mentioned before, YAPME, also has a number, an array of incentives, both, I wouldn't say that tax incentives, but mostly lines of credit. You have the Portugal 2020 that has now been extended, which is huge lines of credit that will, provided that you come down with a down payment, like a portion of equity, they will finance you non-refundable financing for a number of different activities. You have the Programa Regressar, as I mentioned, that if you qualify for the Programa Regressar, you can come back to Portugal and be financed by the government at really interesting interest rates. So again, although this is not a very technical question, we do contact with a different number of entities and structures and companies and government structures that can help you. So if you have, again, if you have specific questions, I think both myself and Michael, as I understood from Michael's presentation, Michael is very savvy of everything that's business related in Portugal, and probably between the two of us, we can direct you in the right direction and help you with that.
You know, if I could add a little bit to that. There's no harm in there's three other sources that people should think about. First of all, there's no harm in contacting the U.S. Embassy. The U.S. Embassy has a commercial services department. Its mission is really a two-way street. It's to encourage Portuguese investment in the United States, foreign direct investment there. But its other mission is to help U.S. citizens that are trying to get rooted in a foreign country. And while, you know, the embassy can't, you know, do the work for you, the embassy is engaged in the business community and may have contacts to help you in the particular area that you want to start a business in. So again, it's worth touching base with the embassy. I can think of a number of cases where people wanted to do that and again found some help there. Secondly, you've got the AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce in Portugal, which again tends to be larger companies, but it's American companies doing business there. It's again worth touching base with the people at the AmCham there in terms of what you want to do, because a lot of it has to do with networking. And then there are American citizen organizations in Portugal, you know, designed to you know, keep people that are expats networked with each other, and those whether it's you know and there's a couple of those organizations, and regardless of which one, touching base with them is also another you know, good source of information, again, to connect you in, to help you and help you from a perspective of others that have gone through the same thing, starting a business in Portugal.
Can I just add one other thing? Everything that Ambassador Sherman just said is great, and also one other organization for those of you who might be thinking about trying to start up a small business in the tourism sector. The Turismo de Portugal has, in fact, a new, I think it comes from some of the European funding that's coming in, has a new program that's focused on sort of merging technology with tourism, and a number of grants that they have available to help small businesses that are trying to, you know, sort of make that marriage. So, and their website, I think, is also, you can you know, scroll through it in English as well as Portuguese, obviously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador and Michael. I think you touched on, but there is like organizations like the American Club. There is an American school in Portugal. There are a few English-speaking schools in Portugal throughout the country. And those are always also ways of meeting and connecting. There was a question earlier on about Lisbon versus Porto versus Coimbra. What is best? Personally, I think it depends on your own personal interests and hobbies and what you like to do. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that. There is a...
That's like asking what's better, Massachusetts, Florida, or California. You know, it's right. I will give you my own personal view on that. Not to diminish anyway. I lived in Lisbon, which when I was there, which I thought was just a great international city. But I love going up to Porto. You know, it's a very quaint, beautiful area, not as cosmopolitan as Lisbon. So it depends on what you want to go there for. But you're on the Douro River. You're in wine country. So think of wine country in California. If you enjoy that kind of life and lifestyle and setting, you've got a really beautiful, quaint city there. Coimbra being a academic center as well, is a beautiful city. So the nice part is, you know, from Lisbon to Porto, you know, it's 3 hours and change or so. You can check out all the cities there and pick the one that fits your lifestyle.
And I would just add to that the Portuguese government is now really trying to funnel where it can new investment into the interior and to some of the less populated parts of Portugal, because one of Portugal's, you know, major public policy issues that it faces is that something like, you know, 80% of the country's GDP and 85% of the population lives in a small sliver along the coasts. And that means that the interior is ripe for the pickings in terms of, you know, great investment opportunities, incredible countryside, super friendly people. You know, it's an amazing place. The Alentejo is getting a lot of investment now in agriculture because of the Alqueva availability of water. But anyways, there are a number of incentives that if you know, as potential investors or folks looking to buy property, you should look at some of the government incentives that exist directing towards those interior regions.
If I may, one quick comment. I'm biased because I'm Portuguese, but as Bernardo said, your words, Michael and Mr. Ambassador, are worth at least 1 billion times mine, since you're not Portuguese. But I do believe that, and I agree with Michael, that you have, I think, the same thing that happened with the when the golden visa first came into force. It drove the prices of real estate in major cities up. Well, it actually drove the prices of real estate everywhere up. But I do think that, and although you have tons of different incentives for tons of different activities, especially setting up companies and productive companies and productive activities in interior areas, I do think that You have lovely, lovely landscapes and lovely locations, which are not coastal areas. You do have the Azores and Madeira, which are unbelievably beautiful. And I do believe that you are going to have, if you choose one of these interior locations to set up residency or to buy a house, I do believe that prices are going to go up. You're probably in for a good investment, not only a good investment, but probably a good time by moving into those places. I do believe that there's going to be a huge development on those areas.
I hope that, thank you very much. I hope that we were able to address many of the issues that have been raised. I believe that very specific and personal issues, I recommend that people get in touch with a lawyer and a tax advisor in order to have all the answers, because here we are only able to give more broad stroke answers. There was one question here about, are you eligible for public health care when you are granted a resident visa? I believe so.
Yes, you are.
So, you know, that's not an issue. There is one question from Mr. Ambassador, which I don't know if you are able to provide this. Could Mr. Ambassador talk about any insights into possible changes to FATCA?
That's how long do we have? Or did you say another 2 hours on that? FATCA has, you know, FATCA, which I'll just give a 1-minute summary because that's not an easy question to answer that way. FATCA was designed really to keep, you know, to keep people from parking money outside of the U.S., you know, tax system. So now, if you're living abroad, or like me, working abroad, and you have a U.S. connection, there are thresholds. I think it's if you have 50,000 euros at the end of the year, or 100,000 euros at some point of the year, and you're working abroad, if you're an expat, I think those numbers, and Bashir can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 300,000 now, or if you're married, 600,000 there that you have to report. And also the financial institutions, which are not just banks, have to report. It's become a problem. A lot of financial institutions don't want to have that reporting. If they don't, there's withholding taxes that have come up. So I think the bottom line, if you're worried about FATCA and FATCA reporting, the best thing to do is to talk to your accountant. And that's the advice I would give across the board. If you're thinking of moving and living in any country abroad, not just Portugal, you know, sit down with your U.S. accountant. Also talk, you know, I think Michael has suggested in somewhere in the chat, getting an accountant in Portugal as well. What will happen with the FATCA legislation, and whether it will get cleaned up in the Biden administration, I don't know. But the bottom line is that it was not meant to be a burden on expats. It was meant to be a reporting vehicle to make sure that American citizens didn't shield money from taxation.
Magda, so you became speechless with the answer.
Sorry. So I think we are coming up to the end of our session today. Bernardo, would you like to close, or shall I carry on?
Sure, Magda. So I'll close. I mean, the FBAR issue is personal to me as well. So I have been having those reporting obligations for several years now. So no, look. So in closing, deep thanks to all the speakers, Mr. Ambassador, Michael, Bashir. So thank you so much. I think it was the attendance speaks for it. In Facebook, we have more than 100 people. Several comments, several likes, and I'm sure several others will look at the event, at the video of the event once it's finished. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, your stories. So there's nothing like telling stories firsthand. So about living and working in Portugal and the details about the legal details, the taxation details, the immigration details. So it was brilliant, and thank you so much for your generosity having this candid conversation. So thank you all as well in the audience for the Q&A. So I wished we had more, an hour and a half. We don't. So I'm sure that we'll make sure to follow up after the event at the chamber. We are very grateful for everyone joining. We are very grateful for PALCUS as our partner making this event possible, and we'll continue to strive to offer our members and friends webinars of relevant topics. So thank you once again to all the speakers today, and please stay tuned. We'll have very soon another related topic, so about cross-border taxation and about Portugal as a platform for investment and tax residency. We'll have a founder and long-term member of the chamber, supporter of the chamber, organizing that event. So stay tuned. For the moment, thank you so much, everyone, and for your time and for your insights and for participating in the event. So I wish you very best for the rest of the day and for the week, and look forward to staying in contact and sharing more about these two countries that we like so much. I don't know, any closing words from Michael? I felt you were trying to say something. Please go ahead. If anyone wants just to close, feel free.
No, not at all. It's just to say, my pleasure. I hope it was helpful. And I think there were a couple of questions about how this will get archived and distributed, including Bashir's presentation, which has tons of really great information. So I don't know if you want to just mention how they can find that.
Yes, on that, Michael, thank you for pointing out. So the session will be available for viewing through the Facebook page of PALCUS at everybody's leisure. The other thing too that I would encourage is anyone that would like to put more questions or needs clarification, please contact the chamber via email. We'll be able to, we're not able to endorse professionals, but we are able to provide links and resources where everyone can find advice or further information on any of these issues.
We'll have it as well on the website of the chamber and on LinkedIn and Twitter. So thank you very much, everyone, again.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ambassador, for your time, Bashir and Michael.
Thank you very much.
It's been great working with you all.
Thank you, Magda, for organizing the event and the Q&A. So truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.